Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Sandman Season 2, Episode 8. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we open with Clarican and Nola making their way back to Fairy, and we find out her reason for so easily capitulating is because she believes Dream's going to be okay, but also just to make sure that comes through, she's going back to Fairy so that she can ask and plead with Queen Titania to lend their army, which even her brother's like, I don't know if that's really going to go the way you think it does, especially because you need to put your glamour up. But for her, it's like, no, I'm going to show her who I really am, and she's going to have to deal with it. And her brother forces the glamour on her, and it's like, right, I will remove it after you've seen the queen. And it's just like time and time again, he apologizes. He talks about how much he admires that fighting spirit in his sister. He's like, I won't support you, but I do admire that fighting spirit. And then immediately kowtows and does what I guess you could say, like, he's trying to do what's best for his sister, because like whatever bad reflects on his sister can reflect bad back on him. But I do think there is a bit of familial love where it's like, no, like, I do want to do what's best for you, sister. I want to make sure you're okay. Like, you know how the queen can be, and I don't want you to suffer her wrath. So she goes and meets with the queen the moment they get back to Fair, because the queen's like, ooh, I want to hear from you. Because even last episode, Nola was like, yeah, the queen's going to want the gossip about everything that's going down in the dreaming. So when things don't go the way she wants to conversation-wise with Nola, she ends up going over to Clark and being like, oh my God, tell me everything that went down. So I think it's so interesting that partway through the conversation, the queen's like, oh, so how's Morpheus? Oh, he's making deal with everything going on. It's like, oh, okay. Did he... And, Nola's like, I was hoping to get an army to ask, to help him. And she's like, did he ask you to ask me that? It's like, no. And it's like, does he know that you're doing that? And she's like, no. And she's like, did he talk to you about me at all? Where I'm like, it's kind of like, yo, it's very reflective of Time and Night from last episode, the Endless's parents. In that regard, where they're like, oh, did your mom ask about me? Let your mom know. I said, what's up? Oh, let your dad know. I said, what's up? It's kind of got that same energy where it's like, we know there's history there, and she could help Dream, but only if she thinks it'll get, like, I don't know if it's a thing of, like, she really wants to be back with Dream, like, hearing about your old piece of work, from back in the day, kind of, knowing he's, death is approaching and stuff like that, kind of gets a little nostalgic thinking about it, and just knowing like, well, if he says he misses me, then I will, most likely raise an army. And then she starts noticing the necklace that Nola has, and I think it irks her nerves because, like, oh, look at this pretty thing. Like, what if I asked you to give it to me? What would you say? And she's like, well, if you were to ask me, I would have to decline and say, like, this was a gift and I can't give it over. And then the queen's looking at her like, huh? And she's like, but that's only if you were to ask for it. And that's when she immediately went to Clarican. It's just like, she specifically wanted it because it was a gift from Dream, and it almost, like, she doesn't, like, it's that thing of she wants Dream to kind of only be thinking about her, even if they're never together. It's still like, no, I want you to think about me. I want you to miss me. I want you to love me. And it's kind of like, it almost feels like, oh, he's kind of gotten his heart swooned by another, which I'm sure that's going to blow back on Nola at some point in time. It's just the queen's, like, temperament, and they already knew how temperamental she was, and that's just going to gain more ire, and the queen's probably going to be a lot more wrathful and not listen to anything Nola has to say, especially when it comes to Dream, because it's going to be like, oh, you found your new plaything that you're into, and it's not me, and she's going to be spiteful for it. We'll see how that plays out. But other than that, we catch up with Dream lamenting and drowning in despair, and good old sis shows up to say, like, hi, and she ends up talking about, like, I'm sorry about what happened to Orpheus. She's like, in fact, I used to go see him from time to time. I never told you because I figured you wouldn't approve, but he would sing to me and he'd ask about you. And it's like, well, there's not much I could tell him because obviously you and me, we don't really spend a lot of time together. But she's also like, I can't blame you. Like, why would you want to spend time with your sibling when they're literally despair. But she's like, sometimes it's good to kind of be wrapped up in it, kind of drowning in it, hit rock bottom, kind of feel what you're feeling to grieve. Because then she's like, but then, it can pass. You can rise up from the depths of the water and you can breathe. And I thought that was so beautiful. But, just her saying like, right, you're here to grieve and feel what you're feeling, and that's okay. But you will breathe again, brother. Just give it time. Who knows how long it'll take? But here is the realm where you can let that, wallow in that, but then swim to the surface and breathe again. And Dream's like, I'm sorry I wasn't a better brother. She's like, no, you don't have to apologize for that. And she's, it's like, he's so certain that death is coming. She's like, don't be so rubbish. And he's like, no, it is. I know what's coming my way. And, we haven't seen how all of his siblings have reacted. Obviously, like, Destruction knew what was coming when he left. He knew like what the choice Dream was making and what the consequences would be. But we haven't seen what Delirium kind of already knew ahead of time before she left. But I think the real weight of it hasn't hit her, and it probably won't hit some of them. Death is probably in a complicated spot because she knows like when the time comes, she's going to have to visit her brother and not on the friendly chat and advice conversations they normally have. It's so interesting how tumultuous his Dream's relationship is with Desire, and it's going to be so curious to see how they react, Because despite their beef, obviously the last conversation they had was after that, the situation at the club, and Desire's like issues with Dream, but it's like, it's another thing knowing like your brother won't be there and it won't exist anymore. That's another thing. So once again, it's going to be interesting to see how the rest play out. And Destiny kind of is very stoic about it, but I'm sure he's feeling what he's feeling, even though it's just not showing yet. Either way, Dream brings up Daniel, and in that moment, Despair's like, Daniel Hall, and she goes over to a mirror and sees Loki and Puck have showed up at the crime scene pretending to be cops investigating Daniel's disappearance. They plant some... Lyta was already thinking it was Dream, but they planted some sand at the crime scene, cementing it. And so Dream is like, I've got to go to the waking world to find Daniel. But it's like, no, the texts say that the kindly ones can't take you or come after you or make it move if you're in your own realm. So as long as you're here, you're fine. But it's like, well, that's probably what Puck and Loki are counting on. They want to draw me out knowing I would be vulnerable. It's like, well, you'd be playing into their hands. It's like, I have to do something. Like, Daniel is the next Dream, the king of the dreaming, and we can't let anything happen because they know how important this is for my realm to keep going. So Dream goes, but he brings in Joanna. So that was a question I had last episode. I was like, was it Joan? Was it Joanna? I couldn't remember. I'm sure it is Joan for short, but she's got her ancestor's name and she's Johanna Constantine. And so Dream comes to her and it's like, cool, I'm going to offer you a job. She's already heard word about like, well, your son and the kindly one's coming for you. It's like, yes, my time is nearing in, but I need you to find Daniel, the next king of the dreaming. And it's like, your payment will be this book. It's your ancestor's journal. And it's like, oh, did you shag her? Did she shag you? And she ends up reading it and she finds out like, oh, it's kind of a little bit of a love story in there. And it's like, you helped her find her first love. But she's like, that's not what I want. But Dream's like, yeah, there's a little bit of similarities between you two. And she's like, why did you give me this? Because she's like, I think you and your ancestor walked the same path, fought the same demons. I think both literally and metaphorically. But for Joanna, it's like everyone I ever get close to ends up dead, so that's kind of not in the cards for me. But it's like, right, I will help you. But they had to go to the crime scene, which means running into Lyta, who just had a run-in with the kindly ones, who kind of setting the stage. They did kind of give her some information, but Lyta is so focused on her anger towards Dream, believing it's him, she didn't see like, oh, like people, basically the warden was like, you've already met the kidnappers. They just presented themselves a certain way, but it's like, well, Dream has always presented himself as Dream. He's never been otherwise. He even says later, I've never lied to you. And she's like, oh, and that includes when you said the next time you come steal the baby. That's what she was worried about when he showed up I mean, just kind of similarly enough when he went to see her and the baby, like before he went to face Lucifer in episode 2, like nearing the end of episode 1. And who was another trip he made to see was Hob. We'll get to that later. So funny enough that, goes and visits both of the people who he has opposite relationships with. But either way, they show up at the crime scene. Obviously, Alex in his dreams and stuck in his eternal sleep, and Dream feeling like, no, he deserves to be there. Because Dream can be a vengeful dick. Once again, did what he did to you, him and his family. He went along with what his father wanted to and just kept you captured. So understandably, you're going to be pissed at him and want him to be punished. So he kind of is a little confrontational with Lyta because she's like, will you bring the baby back? And he's like, no. To be fair, it's him not lying to you, so at least he's up front. But Joanna's like, I will. But Lyta's like, yo, I will kill you if anything happens to Daniel. So we'll see where the ending of this episode takes us in that capacity. But it kind of coincides with right, she just met the kindly ones who are going to be targeting. Once again, we don't know in what shape or form, the kindly ones are going to be let loose upon Dream, and who's going to be the one who ultimately ends up being his undoing. I mean, once again, long list of enemies, which Joanna brings up the fact that you kind of were a dick. You are at fault here. The fact of the matter is, you created the situation we're in right now in multiple ways. You're the reason why, Daniel got taken in the first place. You went to Loki and Puck. You literally went to the biggest tricksters to do this, and you never expected them to pull a trick on you, The fact is, she's finally registered because she's like, I'm trying to save your life. But then she looks at Dream and she's like, this was never about saving Daniel. This was a suicide mission. While you're picking fights with all these people who want you dead because you want to die, because you want to punish yourself for what happened to Orpheus. And it's look through this book. All the stories whenever he ever talked about you with my ancestor, he never blamed you not once. So you shouldn't. And he would say the same thing if he was here. It's just, once again, Morpheus is drowning in his sorrow. And so he's self-destructive in that regard, and he is looking for, he's like, well, I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well go out, with it. It's basically the equivalency of starting a bar fight just to feel anything, just to kind of die, which I think is also interesting when you think about Orpheus was running towards his death, obviously for different reasons. He was driven by grief, but also just I can't die, and that grief is compounding itself. So now you add in now on the opposite end of it, Dream is drowning in his own guilt and remorse and just wants to kind of die because he thinks he deserves to be punished, which is so interesting, paralleled with the fact is he's running into people he's kind of hurt. His actions have hurt. It's Lyta has to live in a life of fear, knowing that her baby could be taken by you at any moment in time. It's could she do anything about it? Then here's Alex, who, you've taken him away from the people he loves, and he is oh, you're not just punishing Alex, you're also punishing the person he loves, but it's also you're just as culpable, so you both deserve it. So he relents to Joanna, being let me handle the baby Daniel situation, and you go back to the dreaming. That's the only way I'm going to handle this. So, but Dream makes a pit stop to go see Hob, and they have a conversation. But we find out, I think it's the same person we saw Hob with in episode 1. Turns out she died. We're oh God, and she was 33. You're Jesus Christ, dude. I heard about your loss, which he's it's just kind of the sucky thing of you live for such a long time. He's I've seen so many wives and children and friends go. It's just the reality of his situation, which Dream's I'm going to go back to my realm and we might not see each other again. He's yeah, sure. You've said this before. I mean, you literally said this to me before you went to go see Lucifer and you came back. Fine. But he's this time is different. It's I don't believe you. But even if this is a final goodbye, let's go have drinks. And so Dream doesn't get into everything because he probably doesn't want to worry Hob, but it's for him, it's I find myself making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and even in spite of myself, of him believing oh, I can change, I'm going to do things differently, but I'm falling into the same cycles. And Hob is like, yeah, jet therapy, which, yes, it took me about 600 years, but yes, I'm finally going to therapy. And I love the metaphor of like a vinyl record being played, and it's like the needle seems like it's in the same spot, but it's getting closer and closer to the center. Basically, Hobbs' takeaway from everything is I've lived a long time, and I've never seen anyone live a perfect life. And no one can and no one ever will. But at the end of the day, all you can do is make the best of what little time you have left. And are there things, maybe there are some things you can try and fix before the end. And so Dream returns to the dreaming, and he goes through his chest, and we see like Azazel. I always struggle with that name, the demon from episode 3 of this season. It's like, nah, keep him locked up. Like, there ain't no forgiveness on that front. But he pulls out another spear, and he takes it and grows it, and it's Alex stuck inside the dreaming. And Alex is like, I'm so sorry for what I did and what I didn't do. I'm so sorry. And Dream's like, I am too, and releases him. And he wakes up and, is able to hug his partner again after all this time. So, trying to make up for the past. All the while this is happening, the Loki and Puck thing went a completely different way than I was expecting. Because I brought it up last episode. I wasn't sure that last shot of Loki at the end of the last episode, I wasn't sure what that was fully conveying. I guess it was just kind of like I thought like maybe there was a little, not maybe remorse or just kind of feeling a little remiss about the circumstances. But it's like, no, he was like, I think that was just him being like dead set in it. Funny enough, it's actually Puck who's the one that's like reluctant and being remissful about the whole situation. So he says like, oh, like I punish people, but only bad people. Daniel's a baby, and babies haven't done anything. So I wasn't expecting like a hobgoblin, someone of such mischief, to have a soft spot, especially considering you're kicking what the god of trickery and fire, who has no love for babies, even though it's like, well, he's got a complicated relationship, I think, with both being a father himself, but also being a son, because it's like, well, I've had like 6 children. Well, this one is a snake, referencing, I guess, Jormungand, or like however you want to pronounce it. It's like one was a wolf, another one was turned into a wolf and ate, the third one got turned into a wolf and ate the fourth one. So he's kind of like, oh, children are terrible. But I think that's also, because he was also bound by the entrails of one, and that was him buried underneath, in a prison under earth. So that's what his father did for him. But it's like, yeah, it's this cycle of fathers not being the best. And that's a pretty massive theme in these back-to-back episodes, but it's been a theme in this season too about, Dream and his position as a father and trying to make things right after all this time. And it's like, is it ever too late to try and make things right? So you have Loki's relationship with his own father reflected upon his relationship with his children, and especially his father's role in that as well. So got no love lost for babies, which kind of plays into like what he does later, but we'll get to that. Puck doesn't want to just use Daniel as a pawn, because it's like, well, he's a means to an end, and to be knocked off the board. Because I guess the plan is to basically have the position someone like Lyta to have all her anger and ire aimed at Dream, and then once that's all said and done, remove Daniel, because that way the ultimate FU is to not only lead to Dream being helping be the domino that leads to Dream dying, but also a double middle finger by removing Daniel and leaving the Dream to collapse and be alone with no king. I think that's kind of maybe Loki's full grand scheme plan. But Puck is like, no, I don't want that to happen, and tries to return Daniel. The moment Dream was there, I was like, that's not Dream. Like the way he's acting, be like, give the baby to me. It's like, the fact is he didn't contact Joanna, especially because like he would want Joanna to be there, because like him holding the baby be a little different. It's like, it's definitely, well, considering the last time we saw him, he like, why would he be just waiting outside? So I'm like, it's definitely got to be Loki tricking him. And especially when he gave in so quickly, like, fine, Loki's deal is up, because, I mean, he even poured his heart out being like, Loki shouldn't be bound by this. You're asking too much of him. And it's like, oh, like, Puck, what he said is speaking from the heart. And then Loki reveals himself. Wow. He's like, don't tell me you love me. And it's like, I think he does. But it's like, oh, come on, like, don't worry. Like, at the end of the day, Daniel will be king, but you can never trust a trickster. That's the lesson they were supposed to have, where it's like, hey, we're together and we're not supposed to trust each other. But the problem is, you have Puck going off and catching feelings and just not quite there for Loki, to the point that Loki's not willing to compromise on what he's planned, even though he does care for Puck. But it's like, well, I thought this was one thing, you made it into something more. And I'm like, I'm not really there, but sure, I'll string you along and put you to sleep. And what does he proceed to do? He burns the baby. I was like, Jesus Christ, because he's like, you don't want to be awake for this part. I was like, did he actually kill Daniel? But Daniel being what he is, I wonder, does he recover from that? And Loki was kind of counting on that, because I'm like, it could also be the situation of, hey, I'm going to put the baby near the fire and I'm going to use my trickery to make it seem like you burn, because I need something real to base the illusion around. So he maybe never really hurt Daniel, or maybe he really did. I don't know. Like, he seems twisted enough to do that, but that seems extra fucked up. But I don't know if that was real or not. And like I said, maybe Daniel can heal from it, and Loki kind of figured as much, considering like Daniel's constitution, being from and of the dreaming. Either way, when it's all said and done, though, he shows light to the picture, and this is just, once again, setting the stage, especially because the kindly ones were like, oh, we'll visit you soon. So, all the while that's going down, Dream is doing something he kind of had locked away and wasn't going to do, and that's bring forth the Corinthian. Now, is it technically the same one, even though he's like, oh, the previous one was a fool, I was younger when I made it, this is going to be different this time. So it's hard to say whether it's like, it seems like it is like Corinthian 2.0. Like, it's not like, oh, the original Corinthian. Well, I think, is it? Or like, did he remake it, remodel it, wipe everything that was the original Corinthian and making this new one? Or is it just made from scratch? But it's like history repeating itself. He even talks about his mistakes, that doesn't always handle things the best way. So this feels like it's going to go the worst way possible, but maybe Dream learned from the past and he has contingencies set in place just in case the Corinthian kind of goes off the path. So I guess this is meant to be used against Loki and Puck, but the problem is that it'll probably, like, Puck will probably get caught up in the crosshairs, and even though he tried to do the right thing, Dream will never know that. And this whole situation, if something happens to Puck, it'll probably motivate Loki to seek revenge too. That's because the sad thing is, Loki could have like removed Puck from the equation, but he didn't. He just put him to sleep, because he's probably like, well, when it's all said and done, you'll forget about the baby. We can continue where we were. Or, like I said, it could all be bullshit. And it's like, oh, we'll keep the baby just to kind of make you happy, even though I don't care for children, you do. So we get our revenge against Dream, and you get to keep the baby as whatever you want. I don't know if that's where Loki's coming at this from, this situation, or what. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.